Imagine discovering that the painting hanging in your home, perhaps worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, isn't just a bad investment, but a sophisticated forgery. Well, that's the scale of the problem uncovered in Canada's largest art fraud investigation involving the work of celebrated Indigenous artist NORVAL MORRISSEAU. And remarkably, one of the key breakthroughs did not come from a police interrogation. It came from scientists looking beneath the surface of the paintings, finding hidden instructions, and analyzing microscopic traces of paint that revealed the works could not have been created using Morisseau's known techniques. But they wouldn't even have gotten that far were it not for my next guest and his client. Jonathan J. Sommer is a lawyer and CEO of Art Experts Canada, and he represents a famous Canadian, not widely known as an art collector, but as a member of one of our favorite bands, the Bare Naked Ladies. And he joins us now. Mr. Sommer, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm well, and thanks for joining us. You represented Kevin Hearn, yes?
That's right.
And his decision to not just accept that he had bought a fake and move on with his life appears to have been one of the catalysts for this entire investigation. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that the majority of art fraud victims don't come forward and don't fight against the people who defrauded them. And so Kevin is a bit unusual personality-wise in that when he found out he'd been duped, he instead of trying to hide his head in the sand, he decided to do something about it. The way that he found out was that he had bought the painting, and a few years later, it was loaned to the Art Gallery of Ontario for a show. And a couple days later, the Indigenous art curator at the AGO approached him and said, "Look, we had to take your painting down because we think it's a fake."
Wow. The story is really interesting, and I don't want to weave around it too much, but why don't most people come forward?
I think because there's a psychological disincentive to doing so. You know, if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who buys an artwork, usually there's a process of kind of falling in love with that artwork. You see it on the wall of a gallery or at an auction house. You buy it, you put it on your wall, and then you tell all your friends about it, and everybody talks about it, and you're proud, and then suddenly you find out, oh boy, there's a problem, and it's embarrassing.
I see. Okay. Then he comes to you. So at what point do you realize this is not a dispute over one painting, but evidence of something much larger?
Well, I'd actually been working for a couple years prior to Kevin hiring me on another couple of cases that involved Morisseau fakes. So I was already well alerted to the problem of fakes and to the fact that they were part of a large fraud ring or multiple fraud rings. But when Kevin came along, that gave the opportunity to expand our investigation and to search more deeply, which we definitely did. We used to, refer to it as going down the rabbit hole, or I ended up calling the investigation the Kraken because it seemed like there were tentacles reaching everywhere.
Well, and Morisseau himself had been warned for years that there were fraudulent works maybe being sold under his name. Was the art world slow, or what happened to those warnings?
They were ignored. So he started realizing there were problems with fakes in the early 90s. And that's when he started having his lawyers send letters and things like that. Over a decade, they eventually became not just letters, but letters accompanied by sworn declarations that he filled out, listing all the fakes he was seeing in different collections. And these demand letters that were sent to these galleries, they were just ignored by the gallery owners. His lawyers were saying, "Look, let NORVAL look at your collection and tell you what's real and what's fake," and the gallery owners just said, "Nope, not interested," and they kept selling the paintings.
And there's such a troubling element here because it's not just a valuable artist whose work was copied. What do you believe is lost culturally when the counterfeit paintings become part of an accepted body in a gallery of an Indigenous artist's work?
Well, I think it goes I don't want to diminish the importance of it being about an Indigenous artist in particular, because Indigenous people in our country have been subjected to countless wrongs over the years, and have had so much of their culture taken away from them and appropriated and exploited. But this goes even beyond that, in that NORVAL, not only was she an incredible Indigenous artist, he was an incredible artist, period, on the, in the sense of, being a great artist of the world. And not only that, but his approach to art was to create a special, almost secret language through color, through iconography, through different motifs that would express his own sort of universalist viewpoint, that where he was trying to join all peoples together, not just Indigenous people, but everyone, and bring them together in sort of shared, common values. And so I think the problem is when fakers come along and make these distorted versions of this, they don't understand that language. They don't understand his code. And so what they end up doing is distorting that, and the ultimate result is that we don't get that beautiful vision that was NORVAL's, and that's a loss for everybody.
Oh, that was so well said. Did he pass away before you ultimately proved that he was right and the people who had been warning him were right?
Yeah, he died in 2007. We weren't able to get a court to accept that there was a problem with fakes until 2017, 2018. I can't
years
remember the exact
later.
Date. Yeah. Oh. So there was a long effort. There was a long effort in the civil courts. There was a long effort to get police to even investigate any of this and or to listen to us. That took years and years and years. But eventually, we fortunately found a police officer in Thunder Bay, Detective Ryback, who listened and got it and did so much of the stuff that needed to be done.
Well, and the science is extraordinary. Infrared imaging and like paint by number instructions almost underneath. Did I read that right?
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. So artists often use underdrawings. NORVAL did sometimes, sometimes not. But a lot of artists will draw with a pencil or something, the basic drawing, and then they put the paint on top. Well, in this case, what the penetrating scans that were used by the Canadian Conservation Institute, they saw through the paint, and underneath the paint, there weren't just lines, but there were written instructions, like in a paint-by-numbers scheme, to all the fraudsters' helpers to fill in these colors, in the way that the lead fraudster wanted.
Honestly. And there's a lot more to it, I know, but this is only a 10-minute interview and we're past the 8-minute mark. So we had an FBI agent on in the art theft unit of the FBI a couple of weeks ago about the European art. And you too have advocated for stronger authenticity guarantees and specialized maybe national art crime unit in Canada. If you could change something about our art market tomorrow, what would have the greatest impact?
I think, it's a combination of things. There are things that could be done legally and by government in terms of creating an art registry, a voluntary art registry. That would be a big step. And making resources available to public collectors, because Canadian Constitution Institute, for example, they don't offer their services to the public at all. It's only for the police and for institutions. So if you're a collector, you can't go to CCI and ask them to look into your painting. You have to go to either my company for certain artworks, and we'll investigate things and help people look into them, or you have to go to the U.S. to the big labs if what you're seeking is forensic help, and they are very expensive. So there's a lot of things that could be done. I think it's a complicated conversation, and one of the things though that could be done is, like I said, that you can as a buyer, first of all, buy art from living artists and get to know those artists. I always recommend that. And I for example, a couple of weeks ago just bought two artworks from a wonderful Indigenous artist from Northern Ontario named Christian Chapman, and I got to talk. I get to talk to him. I get to find out about the art, and there's a connection there. So that's number one. But number two, if you're going to a dealer, demand a guarantee of authenticity from them, so that they can't just say, "Oh, it's attributed to," or anything. But make them put their liability on the line when it comes to authenticity.
And that's, I think, our time. Sorry, but yeah.
No problem.
No, such a great conversation, and thanks for being here, Mr. Sommer.
You're welcome.
Jonathan Sommer of Sommer Law and CEO of Art Experts Canada.